happy to have Anupam Gupta from CMU, who is going to tell us about robust algorithms for online decision making.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everybody, for hanging around. So I'm going to talk about some work that I've been doing with a bunch of people. I'm not going to list them, but it's going to be about robust algorithms, sort of bridging between the worst case and the stochastic case, which most of you sort of have known, and many of you work on this area. So I just want to advertise a little bit of work and some interesting questions out there. So, the way I've been thinking about this is that, these are the two ends of the spectrum. There's worst case algorithm design, and there's this sort of stochastic algorithm design. Worst case is great. In the stochastic case, the model may be given, it may be learned, it depends on us. The worst case is great. It's very robust, and that's really one of the big selling points, right? And but unfortunately, what happens is it is the worst case. So often on your instances, it might be too pessimistic, as opposed to on the stochastic case, you are assuming a certain model that your data is coming from, or you're assuming certain data behavior, and so you can get very strong results. So it's really a trade-off between robustness and optimality. And the more you assume, the stronger the results you could get. But of course, it could be too stylized, too optimistic. And really, the point I want to make is that very often the algorithms that we're designing, we might be overfitting to the model. So can we actually get models which are robust to adversarial noise, in this sense that there is some amount of adversarial corruption that happens? You can think of this as a semi-random model, if you will. So today I'll just study this in the context of online decision making, and but you can imagine this in a slightly more broader context as well. So today's menu, it's a little ambitious, but we'll see how far we can get. It's I'll mostly focus on secretary problems, which most of you know about, I guess, but I'll introduce it, and I'll talk about adversarial and stochastic models both, and then we'll give some algorithmic ideas, and then maybe we'll talk a little about bandit problems as well. But I won't hold my breath. It's time goes faster when you're having fun, right? So okay. So the secretary problem that is so many of you know about. Basically, you have n unknown values which have been chosen by the adversary. You don't know these values, but you want to pick the highest one of these. So you want to, let's say, maximize the probability of picking the highest one, or maximize the expected values that you're picking. So you can pick maybe one item, k items. These are both possible options. And then the way they come, if you the way it's modeled, or this is an equivalent way to the way that it's modeled, each of these items comes at a random time. And these times are chosen IID between 0 and 1, let's say. And once you see an item, you have to decide immediately whether you're going to pick it or not. And if you pick it, that's the one item you're going to pick. So if you're picking k items, you can pick k items, but once you pick an item, you can't discard it after that. So you might say, well, the first item is unlikely to be the max, so you don't pick it, etc. You can wait, and then you can see how it goes. And then at some point you might decide to pick the item. So and of course you can't go back, etc., etc. So by the way, feel free to ask questions if there's anything unclear, and feel free to sort of unmute your videos as well. And at least I can figure out where people want more feedback. Anyways, good. So the secretary problem, as you guys know, is well solved. It's been studied since, it's even got articles saying who solved the secretary problem. So the classic one is called Dynkin's algorithm, and it's for a single item. And it says, wait until halftime. So basically ignore all the items until the halftime. And then once you get to halftime, okay, the animation's not really working for me. So let me just show you the animation. You wait until halftime, and then you choose the item that was the max in the first half and use that as a threshold. And any item in the second half, which is bigger than this threshold, you pick. So so this is a quarter. This has a quarter chance of picking the max item, because if the maximum, the highest item, indeed comes in the second half, which has a probability of a half, and the second highest comes in the first half, which has a probability of another half, then you'll definitely pick V1. So that's a quarter probability of success. And by optimizing this threshold to not be at 1/2, but at 1 over E, you can show that you have a 1 over E probability of picking the highest, and this is the best possible, etc. This problem we understand completely in some sense. And you can extend this to picking K items. And the advantage of K items is you can afford to screw up once in a while. So actually you can start using just Hufting bounds. And what you can do is you can actually start making an estimate fairly early. So at time epsilon, so if this is time epsilon, then at time epsilon, you expect to see epsilon k of the items, of the top k items. You've seen epsilon n of all the items. You've seen epsilon k of the top k items. So if you set your threshold to be like the epsilon kth largest item, that's a pretty good threshold to go for. And indeed, you can show that if you pick items greater than this threshold, and I'm cheating a little bit because you need to account for variance, but you can control the variance. So as long as k, the number of items you're picking, is something which depends on 1 over epsilon, it's like 1 over epsilon squared, which is coming for the usual Chernoff type reasons, you do pretty well. Okay. So if you want to pick many items, you can get 1 over 1 minus epsilon approximation. If you want to pick a single item, like a 1 over E approximation. So this, remember, we assumed that all the items were coming at random times or in random order, really. And this is, one end of my spectrum. The other end of my spectrum is, of course, the adversarial setting. And the adversarial setting, things are hopeless. Because basically, I'll tell you, I'm going to give you a sequence like this of increasing valued items. And then at some point, you're going to fall off a cliff. And from then on, you'll just get 0 valued items. You just don't know where the last item is. And if the gap between items is fairly large, then you don't want to pick the second highest item. You really do want to pick the highest item, but you don't know where the highest is. So random guessing is the best you can do, and you can make this formal. It's not a big deal. So so given that, sorry, PowerPoint seems to be misbehaving. So I'm sorry, guys. Just give me a second. Not completely sure. Can you guys see my screen? Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. Good. So, random guessing was the best you could do. So this is not a good idea. So in this case, what's happening is that the worst case has a terrible approximation. And the best case has a very good approximation. But of course, it really relies on this random ordering. So for instance, what happens is, what if some items come in random order and the rest in adversarial order? If I wanted to, kind of mess up this algorithm, I could introduce a small number of high valued items right at the beginning when I'm setting my thresholds. And then the algorithms just completely fail, right? So in some sense, if I wanted to model the world in some sense, and I'm assuming that the world is mostly random, that doesn't quite work. It has to be completely random for things to work. So that's the setting in which we come in and we ask the question, what happens in a sort of Byzantine world? So let me just make the model formal. The model says, well, you have two kinds of items, red and green. Of course, you don't see the colors. All the values are adversarial, as before. The red items come at adversarial times. So the adversary picks the times where they give the red items. The green items come in random at random times, just as before. So if all the items were green, this is the old problem. If all the items are red, this is the adversarial hopeless problem. Of course, elements don't reveal their colors. And the existing algorithms don't do well. So the question is, can you actually give algorithms that do well? So that's going to be the hope. Now, of course, what's the benchmark? And you think for 30 seconds, and you realize that you can't really hope to compare against the global optimum. If all the green values had value 0 and all the reds had all the value, you can't hope, this is adversarial, you can't hope to compete with that. So you can't hope to get the max overall. It's the greens are useless, the reds are really encoding a hard instance. So instead, what a reasonable thing is that you just compare yourself to the max valued set. Maybe the single item, maybe k items amongst just the green elements, the good guys, green for good. Okay, good. So that's the main setting. And for today, I'm going to assume that I know whatever the benchmark I have. This is the value of the best set. It's not really the max set, it's the value of this max set. Okay. And for today, I'm going to assume that I know some polynomial in n approximation to this value. I can get rid of it with an additive loss. It's like a regret type loss that I might need to suffer. But for today, just imagine that I have some polynomial approximation to V star. Okay. So are there any questions about anything so far is the model clear? Is the problem clear?
It's clear to me.
Perfect. Thank you. So by the way, Seb, I don't have a clock in front of me, so tell me when to stop and I'll stop.
Sounds good.
Okay. So let me tell you the results, and okay. So if you want to pick k items, I can get like a 1 minus epsilon approximation as before. But now, earlier I had said, look, as long as you have many items, you can get a 1 minus epsilon. And earlier, I just had a k being like omega of 1 over epsilon squared earlier. Now I have these dubious extra losses. I believe this is essential, but I don't have a proof yet. So I can get within 1 minus epsilon of the best if I'm picking k items. And if you've been, if you followed this line of work, there's a natural extension to d-dimensional packing problems. And there again, you can get results somewhat like this, though the performance is worse. There's some dependence on D as well. But for today, maybe just think of this as packing k items. You can get arbitrarily close to optimum, even with noise. And then there's this sort of cute little result that maybe I'll mention right at the beginning. I can show you how to pick a single item whose value is like a 1 over log star fraction of the optimum. And it's like I don't have a lower bound, and I believe it should be a constant, but I don't know how to do that either. So if you're bored, you should think about this question. You just want to pick a single item in this mildly adversarial setting. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Quick question. Just a question about the model. Does the algorithm know how many red items there are, or just nothing at all about that?
So the algorithm does not know how many red items there are. And all it knows, at least for today, I'm making the assumption that it has some polynomial approximation to this V star. So it has some ballpark guess of where V star is, but it's like some polynomial range.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, good. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you about these two results. And maybe I'll tell you about theorem 2 first, because it's kind of cute. And okay. So single item, you want to pick a single item and get good value. And we assume that we have this polynomial approximation to V star. Okay. So one of the standard tricks that in this sort of thing that you can do is you can make these like log n value levels. These are all the elements of between values, 1 and 2. These are 2 and 4, 4 and 8, 8 and 16, and so on and so forth. And so since these are logarithmically many, here's a trivial log approximation. you are looking for the best green item somewhere. And maybe I can use green. The best green item lies somewhere. So if all you did was just guessed a random one of these log many value levels and picked any item in that, you'd get a 1 over log n approximation. Okay. Pick a random level, pick an item in that, you're done. It's a 1 in log n approximation. It's like a boring thing, but just keep this in mind. Okay. Here's another obvious thing. If all the spurious items, all the reds, the noise are smaller than the max green, then this Dinkin's algorithm still works because the greens are coming in random order. So as long as the reds are smaller than this max green, they won't mess you up. Okay, so these are the two things to keep in mind. Okay. And now I can give you the algorithm, which is like, a log approximation. I'll give you a log-log approximation. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all of time between 0 and 1, and I'm going to break it into two parts, just two halves. So this is just time half in the middle. Okay, now I must have a red item. So just for scaling, I've imagined that V star, the max green item that I'm looking for, lies in this level out here. You just don't know what time it arrives in. It arrives at a uniformly random time. Good. So now I'm saying, well, there must exist at least one red item in the first half that is bigger than V star, because otherwise the first half, if the first half is behaving like a secretary problem without any red guys, or the red guys are low. So there must exist at least one red person on the left-hand side in the first half between time 0 and 1 half. Okay. There must also exist red guys on the right-hand side which are above V star. That's okay. Okay. Now, this red guy can be anywhere. Now, my claim is that if this red guy, remember the values go up exponentially, right? 1, 2, 4, 8, and so on and so forth. If the red guy lies way above here, as in it has value at least log n times V star, then picking it, just have a 1 in log n chance of picking it, but once I pick it, I get log n times V star, I'm all set. I'm very happy. So if this red guy lies above here at values more than log n times V star, I win with constant probability. Oh, sorry, not with constant probability. The expected value I get is a constant times V star. I win with low probability, but still, that's okay. So the bad case is that all the red elements in the first half are small. But that in turn means that the highest red item in the first half is a log approximation to V star. Okay. So think about it. I started with the polynomial approximation to V star. And after this first half, I have a log approximation to V star. Okay. So that's great, right? Because if I have a log approximation to V star, then in the second round, I'll need only log many buckets in which to run this algorithm. Good. And once you see this, then it's very natural for you to say, look, actually, it's extending this to further setting, to a further improvement is not very difficult at all. Have log star many stages of refinement. In each stage, either you get high value or you refine your estimate of V star. And then you keep on doing this and finally choose one of these log star many log star many intervals in which to play the game. So this idea of iterative improvement is kind of a sort of clean, nice idea, and we used it for a couple of algorithms in this setting. So so just one trick to keep in mind in this neck of the woods. The natural open question that I don't know the answer to is, how do I get a constant factor approximation? Or could I get a lower bound which shows that log star is the best we can do? I don't quite know how to do this. Good. So maybe what I'll do in the sort of remaining time that I have is I'll tell you about the algorithm for the best k items, which has a slightly different flavor to it, which I call sort of show optimism. And this is an idea we often use on these problems. Optimism in the face of uncertainty, right? So this is show optimism, but verify.
You have 10 minutes, Anupam. Just,
say that again.
You have 10 more minutes.
Perfect. That's exactly what I need. So so good. So now I'll tell you about the algorithm for picking, let's say, k items, and I'll maybe a little more impressionistic about the proof, but you can fill in the details yourself, I'm sure. So here's the thing. Pick k items. I want to get large value, and maybe I won't obsess about the epsilons. I'll just say constant times v star. You can extend all of this. I want you to get the sum of the main ideas out here. So good. Again, I know a polynomial approximation to this value. And as before, I'm going to just make log n value scales with almost all the values sitting in these log n value scales. Okay. And now I'm going to, for simplicity, for just being able to think about these things well, I'm going to assume that every value level out here, so these are value levels, right? Just powers of 2. Either they have a lot of green items, good items, or they have no good items. There's, of course, this middle ground between lots and none at all, but we can handle this later on. It's not important. So each value level is either highly populated with greens or is empty of greens. There might be reds everywhere, who knows? So, you'd wonder why we do this. It's just because, if I put down, if I break up time into intervals, then if I have lots of green items, and if I have only, let's say, log many intervals out here, then the number of green items in each group should behave like the average, just Chernoff bounds. And that's the idea, that if things behave like their average, then you can anticipate for them, even if there's noise out there, at least in this case. Okay, so here's the idea. So the idea is break time into C intervals. Think of C as log. So think of this as log. That's log for sure. And think of C, the number of intervals, as also log. But this log, log over epsilon, let's say, or something like this. So the number of intervals is much more than the number of value levels. Okay, you want to pick k items overall. So in each group, in each interval like this, you should pick about k over c. Which k over c should you pick? So the natural thing is to pick k over c of the highest value items. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create budgets for each of these levels, value levels. And I'm going to set these optimistically. I'm going to, hope for the best. So initially, I'm going to say, try to pick k over c items from this first highest value level of the first interval. Now, of course, there might not be enough items out there. So imagine that you picked only so many items. This much got wasted. So what I'll do the next time is I'll set my budget to be the same. I'll say, look, I'm going to optimistically imagine that all these guys were greens. All these guys were good. So I'm going to hope that past performance is a predictor of future success. So I'm going to set my budget to be that much. I'm going to pick that many. what happens to this next budget? I'll say, well, I'll be optimistic. I'll move that budget down here. And now I try again. And maybe in the next round, some of this budget gets used here. Some of this, maybe some of this budget gets used here. That the used up budget goes to the next level. The unused budget goes down below. This used up budget stays where it was. This unused budget goes down below. Basically, every time I don't pick an item in a level that I want to pick it, I move the budget down. I say I over provision in this level. So more or less, I can summarize this thing. I can break time into C intervals. In each interval and in each bucket like this, I set a budget. And I set it to be the highest possible given the past. So I say, look, if I set my budget to be this budget should be the number of items of this, the budget here should be the number of items in this bucket I saw in the first round, number of items I saw in the second round, the min of those things. Because remember, the green guys are coming randomly. So the number of green guys in each is just behaving like its expectation. It's the red guys who can confuse me. And I set the budgets to be as high as possible because I want the highest value. And more or less, the argument goes, the first thing you should do is just convince yourself, if everything is green, then people behave like the average. If there are so many green items at a level, then you see that divided by C items in each interval. And then you're going to get good value. I'm not going to go over the details out here. I'll put up the slides. You can have a look later on. And even if red items are there, basically what happens is every time you don't pick items, that budget moves downwards. But so every time the budgets, I think of this as the budgets are slipping down. But the budgets can never go below the optimal occupancy or optimal occupancy. This is, remember, this is the green optimum. Because the green optimum is behaving like its average in each and every interval. So you'll be picking items, because you were being optimistic, you were doing at least as well as opt was. The optimal green was. The only reason you're suffering is you had budget that you did not use. But if you didn't use budget, you're starting to make progress towards becoming like opt. So if you do the analysis, basically you say, well, your loss is due to the unused budget, and there's a little calculation you can do, and it's as simple as this slide. But it's late enough in the talk, so I won't do that. Maybe I'll just wrap up. If I wanted to get k items, I can do it, provided k is large enough. There were some loose ends. I made an assumption that every value level was either rich or empty. You can assign a little local budget to take care of it. There's minor details. But the point I want to make is what we were doing was optimism in the face of uncertainty, but being cautious about it. Check your work every so often. And there's some sort of natural open questions, some detailed open questions out here. But maybe I'll jump to the last slide, and I'll say, one thing I didn't do was I didn't talk at all about multi-armed bandits, but again, have a look at the slides. Or actually, Todores, I think, is giving a talk next week as part of the semester program, and he'll be talking about some extensions of this multi-armed bandit stuff to RL. So you can check that out. So basically what we saw were these stochastic problems. So this is bridging between stochastic and worst case. So stochastic problems with adversarial corruption, an idea which has been around for quite some time. And I just presented one set of works on this. And both, so there are two algorithms. The other one that I didn't present also uses this idea of cautious optimism. But the sort of the message I want to say is that this is sort of a line of work that I really like, and would be interesting to see more sort of investigation of this. In particular, are these the right models as well? Are these the right questions, the right benchmarks, the right algorithms? So anyways, many questions to be solved. I'd be very interested in hearing if you have any thoughts on this. So thank you.
Thanks, Anupam. So do we have any question directly for Anupam before we move to the more general discussion? We have many Bandit experts on the call, so maybe you can just say what is the result that you have on Bandits. Like, you don't need to define the problem. I mean,
good. So the main idea is, if you are this is a stochastic bandit problem with let's say that C of the rounds are allowed to be corrupted, and where the answers are given not according to the the underlying probabilities, but just arbitrary answers, and then the regret that you get is now, like, there's a term which depends on C, and then there's a term which depends on I can even share that slide out here. So good. So our regret kind of behaves like C. It depends on C and also on the number of arms. I don't know if I believe that the K should be there. And then this is the usual UCB type guarantee with slightly worse performances out here.
you see, and this is regret with respect to the underlying, like, true stochastic model.
Yes.
So, like, if C is equal to T, then there is nothing you can do.
If
it's
C
not
is
like,
equal to T.
Like,
yes,
like
exactly.
you cannot hope for. It's not like a square root C would be possible in this sense.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
yeah,
maybe I can mention that the ideas are similar to this active arm elimination, but we're trying to do active arm elimination, but a softer version of that.
Okay.
As in, you'd never really eliminate an arm, because just noise, just the corruption can cause you to eliminate arms that you really don't want to eliminate. So you kind of downgrade arms and upgrade arms depending on.
I see. And okay, okay. Is a CK added term optimal? I mean, do you need it?
So you need a C. I don't believe you need the K, but I don't know how to get rid of it.
Okay, maybe I have more questions, but
sure.
Let's move to the broad discussion period, so we can ask any question